Partial clearing tomorrow night, lows 30 to 35. Clouds return Saturday with rain late in the day, highs 55 to near 60. I'm meteorologist Rob Carolyn.
And on our 1 hour Newsmaker show today, we have 3 segments. Right now, we're being joined by the Hornell Industrial Development Agency's Shawn Hogan. Coming up at 8:30, it'll be Jeremy Pilati, the school superintendent for Hornell. And at 8:45, St. James Hospital, welcoming now the Hornell IDA consultant, Shawn Hogan. Thank you for joining us, Shawn.
My pleasure, Brian.
Shawn, how are things at Alstom? They had some, I don't know if it was layoffs or furloughs when this thing got really bad a few weeks ago.
Yeah, they took a very cautious approach to even though they are qualified as an essential business because they are involved in the transportation industry, they took a very cautious approach to it, and they had a lot of people, the majority of their white-collar personnel work from home, and they kept the skeleton force in their 3 plants here in Hornell. The good news is they're starting to recall the furloughed employees over the next 5 weeks. And certainly they needed this time. They're meeting CDC and OSHA guidelines and also some training to keep their employees safe and going over the protocols with them. So they are easing back into full operation over the next 5 weeks, which is good news for our region that they are starting to come alive, and over the next 5 weeks we'll recall most of, if not all, of their furloughed employees.
Shawn, do you have a sense of how things are for Alstom as far as PPE goes, the personal protection equipment, the masks, the gloves?
I think that they have taken great, extraordinary efforts to get a supply and have a supply for their workforce. And if they hadn't, they wouldn't be calling back the furloughed employees. They have a very robust and plan of action, which far exceeds CDC and OSHA guidelines. So they're very, very aware and very in tune with keeping their employees safe, and they are certainly ahead of the curve on that. So, and I've never really worked with an industrial organization such as Alstom that has been such a stickler about safety, and even without the COVID, pandemic. I mean, as far as when you tour that plant, you have to wear a vest, you have to wear steel-toed shoes, you have to wear eye protection, you have to wear a bump cap, and you have to walk within specific outline lines. So they're very, very in tune to safety, and that's paramount in their efforts is to keep their employees safe. So, I have every confidence in Alstom and their environmental and safety teams at Alstom. They've even bumped up they have an occupational health service there with nurses and healthcare professionals. So I'm very confident and pleased actually that we have a quality of employer we do, such as Alstom in our midst.
How about other businesses with a PPE, the essential businesses that are still open, Shawn? Do you have a sense of that? Has anyone from any of the essential businesses reached out to you and asked for help on PPE, or how's that going?
Yeah. I haven't heard from any other employers, and I'm not in the business of identifying places that need PPE
Right.
or
That's true.
personal, but we, our employers, and most of them here that are involved in the transportation industry are considered essential businesses. So many of them have been operating right along. And I'm sure if the employees had felt threatened, or if they didn't feel safe, we would have heard about it, or someone would have heard about it, during this process. I know we have an employer here, Strobel Supply, and others. I think Bradley Supply, that may be in the business of supplying at least N95 masks and things like that nature, and they've been doing on a regular basis. I know Strobel's has. So we do have a company locally that is involved in that particular business of supplying and selling N95 respirator masks. So I think that they're in a good position to be able to supply to local industrial users if they need them. So I'm not, like I say, I'm not an expert, but I haven't heard anything where from employees that from these various organizations that feel unsafe. So I think most everybody is taking this very seriously and taking the necessary precautions for their employees and their customers.
Speaking with Hornell Industrial Development Agency consultant Shawn Hogan on this segment of Newsmaker. The Hornell IDA is meeting today, and they have some plans to help local small businesses. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I know that our executive director, Jim Griffin, has been, keeping me appraised and with his discussions with the agency attorneys. As you know, the first phase of the Small Business Administration PPP program, which payroll protection program, that a lot of smaller businesses were left out of the process, and the money was used up quickly by many of the larger banks, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, and they got the money out to a lot of larger clients, and actually they used the loophole in the law that a lot of larger businesses that actually employ more than 500 people were qualified because they took it on a per location basis. And a lot of large companies, hotels and restaurant chains, have took advantage of that loophole. And that was all due to lobbyists adding that in the law. And that's one of the problems in Washington on K Street, is that when you have an emergency legislation such as this pandemic, the legislation to assist the people and small businesses, there should be no lobbying allowed. But that's not the way of Washington there was, and so the process, the PPE, the Payroll Protection Act, was kind of became an adulterated process, and the money didn't get to a lot of businesses that really needed it. To Jim Griffin's credit, and he saw that, and he's proposed offering a emergency loan program or a small business economic development loan program for businesses within Hornell. And he's going to present his proposal to the board today and see if they approve it. So I don't want to get ahead of the process, but I think it's a good program. I think the total amount that's been made available is about $250,000 if it comes to fruition, and local businesses could be able to apply for that right through the Industrial Development Agency, and hopefully there'd be a quick turnaround. And it could be a minimum of $2,000 up to $20,000. So there is, and I give the executive director credit for moving, seeing that there was a need. One of the reasons we kind of took a wait and see attitude, because to see how the Small Business Administration loan programs or PPE program, how that rolled out, and unfortunately it didn't roll out well for some of our businesses locally. And now there's a phase 2 of that. As you know, that the Senate and the Congress approved a phase 2 of and adding another $300 billion to the project to address the shortfall in funding. And we'll see if that plays out better for smaller businesses of 500 employees or less, better than the first one did. So we're always hopeful, but I think people should take heart in the fact that we have local institutions that are stepping up to the plate, and hopefully there'll be some relief coming shortly.
Talking with Shawn Hogan from the Hornell IDA. You talked about the small businesses, and you talked about the banks getting big chunks, the bigger banks getting big chunks of the money from the stimulus. Tracy Matrano, if you could put on your county Democratic chair hat, Shawn, is having a press conference today at 11 a.m. It's going to be online. You go to her website, matrano2020.com. It's probably, I'm guessing it's a Zoom or conference or something like that. Your thoughts on how Tracy Matrano is doing at this point in the campaign, Shawn?
Well, this is a new world for politicians and for people that hold elective office and people that are running for office, is that everything's become virtually online. And it's even though a lot of politics and a lot of campaigns, they have the social media element of their campaigns, it's not always been an exclusive element of campaigns. Politics is still about people. It's still about going out and being able to have that face-to-face contact and shaking hands and taking questions in a group setting or town hall or something like that. So this is new to everybody, to really trying to focus in a campaign entirely on online, using social media, using Zoom, or using go to the meeting, all these different things that are out there. So it's a new world. How campaigns are using it, I think they've been beginning quite effective. It's trial and error for a lot of them, but for example, I just was on a Zoom meeting last night with the Biden campaign, and what consisted of committed delegates to Biden, and there was like 300 people on the Zoom meeting. So every campaign's getting the swing of it. It still is not a full replacement of the human element that's so needed in politics, but for now, we'll have to live with it.
Shawn Hogan, another Democratic Party question. Senator Gillibrand put out a statement, had a press conference yesterday. She's trying to start up an organization called Health Force, where they would hire hundreds of thousands of workers across the country, and they would start out doing computer data entry work related to COVID-19 about the patients, and administer tests for COVID-19, and eventually, hopefully, be administering the vaccines to. Your thoughts on Senator Gillibrand's proposal for this health force organization?
Well, I think that you are going to need a great number of people, or healthcare professionals, or people who are trained to track, COVID-19 cases and how people are handling the situation. If you've had the disease and been cleared, or if you've been tested and you're negative, or if you've been tested and you're positive, and to trace your movements and your contact with people and where you've been. You can see a lot of that taking place on a smaller scale here in Steuben County when they report when they have a positive case, and they do some trace contact, where these people have been, where they've frequented. Yeah, I can see that that may be needed and will be needed. I think a lot of politicians are out there and they feel that they have to be relevant, they have to say something, have to propose something in this time, because they're not in Washington now. They're at home. They're just like the rest of us, and you feel you have to somehow, to stay relevant, you've got to propose different things. I think Senator Gillibrand is on the right track, and I think that certainly that would have to be embraced on a national level, and would have to come into some type of legislation. So I'll leave that to her, but certainly there would be a need for professionals, healthcare professionals, to assist in monitoring the movements of people that have proved to be positive, and make sure that they do what they're supposed to be doing and are responsible about it.
We're speaking with Steuben County Democrat Chair and Hornell Industrial Development Agency consultant Shawn Hogan. Here on this segment of Newsmaker Show, we've got Hornell School Superintendent Jeremy Pilati, and find out how things are going for the students and staff and the teachers and the Hornell school system. That'll be at 8:30. At 8:45, the St. James Doctor. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment with Shawn Hogan.
Selecting a nursing home for a loved one isn't easy until you've discovered Hornell Gardens Nursing and Rehabilitation. Hornell Gardens delivers the highest level of care, compassion, and commitment with amenities and activities that will enrich body, mind, and spirit. It's a place that's close to home. Stop in for a tour of Hornell Gardens, located at 434 Monroe Avenue in Hornell, or to learn more, call 585-222-CARE or visit hurlbutcare.com.
The award-winning service department at Maple City Dodge is open. They're ready to pick up, sanitize, and return your vehicle after the work's done. The sales department is also available. Gary, Larry, Aaron, John, and Doug are working from home and making great deals, including 0% financing for 84 months and 90 days no payment on select 2019 and 2020 vehicles. Some restrictions apply. Contact Maple City Dodge to get in touch with your favorite sales guy. Maple City Dodge in Hornell. Proud to be serving you.
Back with Shawn Hogan here on the Newsmaker Show. Shawn, the governor has been talking about plans to reopen upstate, and Bob Duffy and Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be a part of that. How do you think things will go as far as opening up this region, and in particular Hornell?
Well, I don't know. Obviously, there's the CDC regulations where they have a three-phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 about reopening. I think, since the governor has extended the stay-at-home orders and business closures through May 15th, I think when you take a look at where we are as far as the number of cases that are being diagnosed locally, and I think that would be the statistic most that would be all telling, to see if we can go back to some type of normalcy. And like I say, I think that this virus, until we have a vaccine, is going to be with us. So I don't think it's going to be normal as we know it. It's going to be a new normal. There's going to be people wearing masks and trying to practice social distancing. So, that's how we do that and how we roll it out certainly it's way above my pay grade because I have no idea. I know a lot of people are frightened. A lot of people are taking this very seriously. Some aren't. And those who aren't, they're the gamblers. They're the ones rolling the dice, and they're going to take the chances. And but if they don't care about themselves, they ought to care about others. As the governor says, it's not about me; it's about we. And a lot of people are walking around who are asymptomatic, who may not ever show any symptoms, but they're carriers of the virus and they're spreading it. There's an old story, if you remember, back in New York City in the 1800s. They have a woman named they called her Typhoid Mary, and actually that's a true story. She was a carrier of the typhoid bacteria or virus, and she was always asymptomatic, and she worked as a household servant, and she spread typhoid all over New York City. Finally, she had to be ordered by the courts to live in isolation on an island off New York City because she wouldn't adhere to the guidelines, and so that's kind of it's a true story, but that's what happens. People may never show any symptoms, and they may be a carrier and a spreader. So people have to be careful, and they have to follow the guidelines. And until there is a treatment for this disease that's very successful and or a vaccine. So I'm always tried to take an optimistic approach, but I'm telling you, I'm taking this seriously. It's an issue that has to be addressed. Look at the number of deaths in this country. And unfortunately, it's spread across every age group, but the ones that are being hit hardest are those in their 60s and above. And since I'm part of that risk group, I'm taking it very seriously. So, and I would recommend everyone else do the same.
Speaking with Shawn Hogan in this segment, again, we have Hornell School Superintendent Jeremy Pilati coming up at 8:30 and St. James at 8:45. It'll be St. James CEO Brian O'Donovan and St. James anesthesiologist Dr. Ismail Mayer. One issue in the governor's press conference that was addressed a couple days ago was addressed by Melissa DeRosa, the governor's secretary. Unemployment claims. The State Department of Labor has been overwhelmed with the unemployment claims coming in, and they hired something like 3,100 extra workers at the Labor Department to help get these forms, and they had originally 275,000 unemployment claims and forms to go through. Now as of the other day, they were down to something like 40,000. How's that going locally, Shawn?
I haven't heard anything. I know some people that applied for unemployment, and they expressed the frustrations of being able to apply. They had to originally make a phone call. You have to get online, and then you have to make a phone call. But all that's changed now. The state partnered with Google, and they came up with a really a more efficient and direct plan, and where you do everything online, and then they'll call you. And I know that some people have been frustrated, but I have heard of some success stories where people are starting to get their checks. And the beauty of that is that the checks will be retroactive from the time you became unemployed. And the state has waived the 7-day waiting period. So, people are getting their money. I think one of the problems they have two programs. They have the state program, regular unemployment, and then they have the CARE Act, the Emergency Unemployment Act from the feds, which gives people $600 from the federal government, regardless of what your wages were. And in many instances, people were actually making more money through the state unemployment and through the federal program of $600 than they were working. And that has proven to be a little bit of a problem or a disincentive when people are recalled to work. They say, "Hey, wait a minute! I'm because of the $600, I'm making more money staying home." Well, I think people have to realize that $600 is temporary. It's going to go away, and it's going to go away quicker than you think. So don't become complacent with that federal $600 because it's, as they say, a false positive. It's not going to be there forever. So if you're recalled to work, be happy about that and return to work. But I think they'll eventually get through it. It's not by lack of effort. It's just that the system is overwhelmed. And now if you keep reading, now it started to impact hospitals where people are not locally here in St. James, thank God, but I just read where Olean General and other healthcare facilities are starting to furlough employees because people aren't going to the hospital for their regular care and elective surgeries and things like that. So we've got to solve that problem too.
Shawn, with that, we have to leave it. Jeremy Pilati from the Hornell School System coming up next. Thank you, Shawn, for joining us.
All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Directive from the president.
President Trump tweeting, "I have instructed the United States Navy to shoot down and destroy any and all Iranian gunboats if they harass our ships at sea." The post comes a week after 11 Iranian gunboats harassed U.S. Navy and Coast